Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We're live streaming our podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and on YouTube. And this is our last podcast of the season. So a massive thank you to all our dedicated patrons for your support. We literally could not have done it without you. You can visit patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more about getting involved next season. Coming up on our final pod then, a season of poor recruitment and managerial mistakes finally comes to an end with an ironically thrilling game at home to Liverpool. We'll look back on that performance, and it's going to be a busy few weeks of comings and goings at Staplewood, with some players already saying their goodbyes. We'll discuss what else we can expect to happen this summer. Plus, there's a champion to be crowned in our FPL league later. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by everybody. It's a full house. Steve Grant is the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen de Cour is the writer of the blog League 1-10. Ben Stanfield is the founding father of the Total Saints podcast. Alfie House is the Saints reporter for the Southern Daily Echo, and Jacob Tanswell is the Southampton writer at The Athletic. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 235 of the Total Saints podcast. So the final game of a sorry season threw up a few surprises. 4-4 the final score on the final day of the season at St Mary's. Glen, a crazy game to finish a crazy season. What did you make of it yesterday?
It was quite mad, wasn't it? It was, as you said, very, very entertaining, which I didn't really know what to expect from the game. It could have been absolutely dreadful, and it did look like it was going to be horrific when we went 2-0 down in 10 minutes or whatever. I could see that, 4-0 down at half time and no one being there for the second half at that stage. I was surprised quite how many people were there, to be honest. It did look fairly full. I was expecting it to be very patchy with people sort of not bothering or whatever. So 2-0 down, and the key moment of the game was getting the first goal back, Ward-Prowse's goal, which of course kept the game close, kept us in it. There's a lovely bit of play by Alcaraz, which sort of illustrated why we really need to keep him if we possibly can for next season. 2-2 at half time, courtesy of we've seen some dreadful goalkeepers this season, mainly in our goal, but that guy, my word, I mean that was a hologram of all holograms there. He was just atrocious. It was Angus Gunn bad. Don't copy his dad in on the.
We almost got through the whole season.
Yeah. I mean, he was terrible. Zero presence. So I mean, the first goal went under him. At half time, it just seemed like everyone just gave up defending. It's interesting with Liverpool because obviously they played a lot of fringe players, and Liverpool fans are never shy of bigging up everything about their club, but their fringe players are really, really poor when you consider the level of the club and what they're trying to achieve in terms of winning trophies and stuff like that. So, I mean, Suleimana's run for the goal for his second goal is great because he takes it 70 yards or whatever. You watch Joe Gomez. I mean, when you watch it back, just watch Joe Gomez. He's just sprinting back towards his own goal, seemingly completely unaware that there's any danger at all. And by the time he turns around, the ball's in the net. It's just so bad. And then the game took a turn for the surreal, obviously, with Adam Armstrong scoring with his first kick. I mean, Henderson put him through with a pass which was as bad as almost as bad as Romeo Lavia's one, and for the first goal. Yeah, and it was just weird. I mean, all the substitutions in the second half were kind of, let's have another standing ovation for a player who's not going to be playing for us anymore. It was a bit weird. So, on the one hand, you could say, Sellers managed it well, if you like, and he sort of gave everybody their moment. But you could argue that it's another illustration of him being just too nice.
Too friendly, yeah.
Yeah, too nice. I mean, I'm sure Prowse looked a bit embarrassed when he came off as well. I think he'd have preferred to stay on and play 95 minutes like he always does. But it was a strange day, and it could have been a lot worse. It was a very awkward day for everyone involved, bearing in mind half the team are leaving, and along with the manager. So, I think overall, with it being entertaining, and some of the youngsters getting on the pitch and Tino getting on the pitch again, I thought it was probably as decent as it could be. And of course, we didn't get beat, which is a bit of a rarity. Yeah, happy days.
I must just say hello to Mansford07, who says, "Have you got a person on the pod for every win this season?" That's like, yeah, it is. It was 6, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Steve, we score 4 at home and still can't win. That's another game that sums up the season, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so 4 times this season we've scored 3 or more goals, and we've not won any of those games. So that's that's a pointer to the future, isn't it? Yeah, and as Glenn said, a stupidly entertaining game. Just mental, wasn't it? It was kind of a testimonial game at times for just comedy moments, players just doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. Adam Armstrong running 40 yards and scoring, sticking it in the corner for 1. And yeah, it was just one of those sort of end of season games that you do quite often get those with teams who've got nothing to play for. Liverpool couldn't change position up or down. We couldn't change position either. So yeah, for the players, there's literally no consequence to this game. So as a result, they put on a bit of a show, and it was good fun, really, wasn't it? I think. I mean, if you're being hypercritical, you'd be annoyed at being 4-2 up and blowing that in the space of a minute. But I mean, I kind of quite like the fight that the players had with that 4th goal that Liverpool scored, because there was clearly a blatant handball by Gakpo out on the wing, and there was about 5 or 6 players all then crowded around the referee, like immediately after that goal goes in, screaming at him to bring it back or chat to his mate on VAR or whatever. And it's like, well, where's this kind of fight and getting in the referee's face been all season? Because that's been kind of one of the things we've pointed out over the season, is that we are too nice. Just similar to the manager. There's not been that sort of pit bull about us. The sort of not willing to take stuff lying down. We've been far too easy to kind of get in the faces of this season. And I mean, that's the attitude has got to be the one thing that changes with whoever. I mean, Russell Martin seems. I mean, it's still not been confirmed yet. So
at the time of recording,
there's still an element of doubt. But assuming it is him, that's one thing he's got to get into this squad, is that you've got to be kind of on the front foot, and you've got to kind of fight your corner, really, because we've done far too little of that this season.
Jacob, an entertaining end to life in the Premier League. Did you enjoy it yesterday? A bit surreal, really.
No, I loved it. It had everything, didn't it? It had Cody Gakpo finally scoring at St Mary's. It had Adam Armstrong scoring clinical. Lavia with passing. Bearing in mind, he's the only player that can actually probably receive the ball in that position, passing it straight to Jota against a team that wants him this summer. He had everything. I thought Lianco's scoop as well in that first half, when he was out on the left and decided to try and scoop Salah. I just thought everything about it was fantastic. And I even like the Ward-Prowse substitution as well. I thought it's so obviously a goodbye. But even afterwards, Sellers, he was in quite a punchy mood. He was in a good mood. I think he's spoken well the last 2 press conferences. And he said goodbye and I'll see you soon, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. So had everything, really enjoyed it. No one can really look into it because it counts for nothing next year, apart from if you want to play it from the back, you probably need to do a bit more practice in that, given the first goal.
First things to work on. Alfie, was that some of the character that's been missing for this much of the season? Because, you know, to come back from 2 goals down, you're just scratching your head going, where's this team been all year?
Yeah, I think you could say that, but ultimately the game was, as Jacob just touched on there, meaningless, and it was crazy, and it was Liverpool's dysfunctional back line that even Ruben Sellers pointed to after, when he said, he said that the only reason Calvin did well basically was because Liverpool didn't have their first team defenders in, which I thought was a slightly bizarre comment, but it was true. They didn't. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because we point to all these 1-0 losses for, playing 19th, I think 3 or 4, or even 5 times this season, losing 1-0. But yeah, as Steve said, when they score 3 or 4 on 4 occasions, they can't win those games either. So I thought it summed up the season a little bit well. But yeah, it was an enjoyable game, and let's see what next season brings, I guess.
And Ben, it's great to have you with us as well tonight. What did you make of it all yesterday? I mean, a result that I don't think any of us saw coming. We'd have probably predicted that Liverpool would score 4, but I don't think any of us had Southampton down for scoring 4 in return.
Well, I think my prediction was 3-0, if I remember correctly, Martin, so I wasn't far off. But yeah, I think it was just bonkers. Like Jacob says, I mean, from that that first goal that we give away, passing it across our area, right to, I think Lianco was captain at the end of the match. I mean, everything in between that was just bizarre, wasn't it? You know, we had a team that's relegated. We got a youngster doing backflips when he scores a goal, you know, it was just crazy. But I think it reiterates, and you guys have spoken about this on the pod a lot, you know, our record against the top six, and I appreciate that Liverpool made a lot of changes, but Saints have actually performed really, really well against the big six this season. It's probably just Spurs and Man City away where they got turned over, you know, first game of the season. Glen will remember it, of course. It's been feels like a long time ago, but actually all the other games they've played against the big six, they've actually performed. And I think the frustration for a lot of us is if they'd taken, you know, even probably 75% of those performances into the games that, like Alfie just says there, around them, they probably wouldn't be in the position they're in. So yeah, a bit of a glimpse of, you know, what could have been. And I've spoken to quite a few sort of friends and family today that really enjoyed yesterday. I think, you know, they weren't expecting it, and I think probably have taken a bit of a smile into the summer that they maybe didn't expect to.
Yeah, that's nice. Bit of optimism. Glenn, we'll get on to some of the departures in a minute, but Suleimana finally scoring a couple of goals is pretty decent. That's the sort of performance you might expect, I guess, from a record signing.
It's kind of a win-win for everybody, isn't it? Because I think it's fairly well known that he's not been particularly happy since he's been here, and why would he be? He's hardly played. You know, he's joined for 22 million quid and has hardly been given a game. That said, when he's been on the pitch, he hasn't done anything particularly. I think one assist was it up at Newcastle. So yeah, I was surprised to see him played sort of right out the middle, and to get 2 goals is great for him, because it, you know, I mean, already if you look at those look on the internet at all the Saints stories, there's all these articles being written of, oh, the new Sadio Mane for Liverpool to sign. So I mean, as far as Suleimana's concerned, that's great. If he wants a move, and he probably does, then, you know, it's worked out really well from him. You have to bear in mind the context of Liverpool having Gomez and Matip not bothering to defend, and the goalkeeper just doing nothing whatsoever. So yeah, great. But then Son Heung-min won goal of the season for an identical one to that one that Suleimana scored in the second half yesterday, where he just ran 70 yards in a straight line with no challenge. So, you know, it was good from him. It was obviously his best performance for us. Nice to get 2 goals, but it has to have a little bit of context of as to how bad Liverpool's defending was. But I don't anticipate him still being here next season. I think he's still one of the players that, if they get an offer anywhere near what we paid for him, I think they'll let him go. Bearing in mind, you know, other players that we are going to struggle to get rid of. So anything could happen with him. Basically.
I did enjoy his post-match, his interview. I think that's probably the first one he's done where he said, well, if I stay, I stay. And if I go, I go. It's a new challenge. So refreshingly honest. What did you make of his performance yesterday, Steve? As Glenn said, we've got to kind of keep it all in context. And I know Ruben Sellers afterwards said that he needed time to learn the Premier League. So he was almost saying, don't blame me for not starting him sooner. Is it a case of we just signed him too late? Maybe had he joined back in the summer, things could have been a bit different?
I mean, yeah, possibly. But then had we signed many players back in the summer, an actual goal scorer for a start, then things would have been completely different. And I think sort of this idea that you necessarily need to learn the Premier League, I don't think you do. I think you need to learn the players around you. I don't think the opposition really makes that much. That much of a difference in terms of the systems and things like that, because by and large, teams in the top European leagues, the vast majority of them play similar systems or slight variations of, and I think it's the interaction between individual teammates that is the key. And of course, let's not forget, he came in as a winger. Under a manager who doesn't play with wingers, so he's always going to be struggling from the word go, really. And I mean, even Sellers' formation doesn't really utilize wingers to the same extent as a lot of the sort of top managers do. But when we have gone 4-3-3, that's the sort of role where I think he could fit in quite well, and I think he's probably a little bit underused. But no, I mean he was good yesterday, and yeah, I mean I would like to think that we can keep hold of him, but yeah, as Glenn says, if he's one of the few players that is attracting genuine interest, and we can get basically all the money back,
it would need to be what, 25 million quid plus, I guess, as an offer.
I would think so. And if we get that money back, along with what we're almost certainly the sort of big cash we're likely to get for Lavia and Ward-Prowse, then that's a big chunk of money that covers the shortfall that we're gonna see in terms of revenue. Once we then look at, have an assessment of what else is around, Nathan Teller's theoretically going to be back. I mean, potentially Jack Stevens is back. I mean, who knows what the intentions of Bournemouth and Burnley are in regards to those two players. So that's another potential windfall if either of those clubs decide, right, no, these are the guys we want, and we're actually going to dust off the checkbook and hand over the money that Saints want. I'm not sure it's going to pan out that way. I imagine for those two, I think they'll end up looking elsewhere. I think Taylor will be too expensive for Burnley. I think with Bournemouth, I think they can probably find better. But we'll see.
I want to talk a bit about James Ward-Prowse as well. Ben, standing ovation yesterday when he was subbed off on 87 minutes. As we mentioned earlier, I think Jacob said he probably would have been annoyed that he wanted to play for the final 5 minutes or so. But that was pretty emotional yesterday. And I think it's fair to say that's someone that deserves to be playing in the Premier League next year.
Yeah, I think it's catch-22, isn't it? Because as Saints fans, we obviously want to see him, I think, in the team. You know, we're aware that the squad needs a rebuild, but potentially you don't want to lose your captain at any stage, really. But I think, yeah, you know, he's a player that he's played for England. Saints have undoubtedly helped him on that journey. But, you know, someone that's been at the club longer than Matt Letizia has. I think he's been there, 20 years now, hasn't he? So, you know, someone that I think I wouldn't say he's necessarily underrated, but I think he's one of those players that potentially you know you'll kind of miss him when he's gone more than you kind of miss him when he's here, if that makes sense. And I think, you know, you look at the stats. I mean, he's probably not had his best season, but I think off the record, and Alfie and Jacob will know better than me, I think he's top goal scorer in the Premier League. He's top assists for Saints. You know, most passes, most tackles, most interceptions. I'd imagine he's in the top 3 for distance covered in the Premier League, if not number 1, you know, because he's normally out there. So I think, you know, I think he said yesterday he could have gone, you know, he feels like he's delivered this season and is going out with his head held high. And I think it's hard to argue with that. But I do think as captain, again, I heard him say during this week that there's only so much he can do and standards have slipped and things like that as well. So I think there's elements of his captaincy that I think probably people would say he's not the strongest leader out there. But I think in terms of what he's done for the club and, you know, whether he does get to stay or go, I think it was nice that he got that opportunity yesterday and for St Mary's to kind of say goodbye to him.
It was an emotional moment, wasn't it, Jacob? Everybody on their feet and everyone videoing it too as he left. That was there was a lot of those videos doing the rounds yesterday. But I don't think anyone would begrudge him his move. I know we've spoken about this before, but he would leave with everybody's best interests.
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously you had Theo Walcott first, who he got a standing ovation. Everyone sat down. Elyounoussi then goes off, another standing ovation, or well, half and half, and then James Ward-Prowse. So obviously the biggest standing ovation for him. I think what James Ward-Prowse has done, a lot of it is intangible as well. People don't see it in terms of him being the conduit between the dressing room and the ownership in some respects, but also the coaching staff as well. The role model he is, the attitude he is in terms of welcoming the youngsters in when they train with the first team. What he does, he's the glue in a dressing room that's been pretty fragmented this season, and he's always the guy that everyone looks to, and he can only do so much. So he might not be the loudest, he might be the only one that speaks in a huddle after they concede a goal, but what he does do is that he's one that everyone looks to when there's a crisis, and unfortunately there's been too many crises this season for Ward-Prowse to keep bailing Southampton out of it. I think what he's done, especially in the last couple of years, but especially this year, he might not have had his best year like Ben says, but I think I've appreciated him a lot more this year because the burden on him is incredible, and he's 28 now. He's in the prime. He has to get a move away, and for a guy that's done so much for Southampton over 2 decades, given everything, you know, you can't accuse him of leaving anything left in the tank. I think having a move away to stay in the Premier League and to keep his England aspirations alive is what he deserves.
Is that going to be key, do you think, Alfie? Just the England aspirations, and this is a chance for him to prove himself at potentially a bigger club and maybe win something, dare I say, or at least get back in that England squad?
I think possibly. He's got a very hard task once to get back in the squad, hasn't he, really? I think we're being totally honest. Gareth Southgate seems to like Conor Gallagher, and obviously we've got Bellingham, Rice and that as well. But I think Adam Blackmore made a good point this week on the radio. I think he spoke to James Ward-Prowse during the week, and he asked him what was his favourite seasons at Southampton. And he said about the European seasons, and he said, which one? He said, either. I think James Ward-Prowse was always making it relatively clear that European football is his aim, and he wants to experience that. He loved it playing for Southampton, and hopefully he gets that again. Obviously, I'd like to plant the seed in his head that if he was to stay and get Saints promoted, he would be an even bigger legend than he already is. That would be fantastic. But on the leadership thing as well, I think we only have the testimony of others, and I think Theo Walcott came out and spoke to us, and he was very clear that right, you might not hear Prowse all the time if you're sat in the Northern or whatever, but he is the leader in that group, and he said this. And on a professional level as well, with Ward-Prowse, he's somebody who often gets wheeled out by the club when they've been hammered or when they've lost a big game, and it's probably not at the time he wants to talk, but he's always professional. He's always happy to chat, and he's always pretty honest. I think the only question he's ever been not honest with me, in my opinion, is asking about his future. I think it's because he probably can't reveal anymore, so you have to give him that. But yeah, I'll miss him for sure.
So who captains the side next year then, Steve? Because or next season? Because with the new manager coming in, the role of the captain, I guess, is going to be pretty decent as well. Is it just a case of waiting and see? Because there's nobody to me that really sort of jumps out at the moment. But we have to see who's still there come the end of the transfer window.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to assess that situation when we know who's still around. You kind of look at the current makeup of the squad, and I guess, I mean, it's weird having this conversation now, given what we've been saying pretty much since August. But Jan Bednarek feels like the most obvious option at the moment, which is faintly ludicrous. But yeah, you kind of look at who else. I mean, Jack Stevens, if he comes back, he's a leader, but he's not I mean, as I've banged on about him in the past, is that he's brilliant at organising other people and less good at organising his own game, which is a little bit of a problem, I think, in that situation. I think we just need to have a solid defence that knows what they're doing and can get themselves organised and not need to worry about what their teammates are doing. Beyond that, I mean, you possibly look at players who might come in.
Lianco for me,
well,
all day.
I mean, it would be a fun option, wouldn't it?
Be hilarious.
If Lianco stays, then I mean, he's a candidate, isn't he? He's one of the few experienced players we've got.
Wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he?
Definitely. And he's absolutely the sort of player that every fan would want as captain, because of all of the very obvious outward sort of signs of emotion that he displays. Whether that's quite what you want in the dressing room, when you want a little bit of a cool head and someone just to calm everyone down and say, "Come on, lads, let's switch on and just make sure we get this sorted, get it over the line." Not quite sure he's quite the same candidate for that sort of role, but we'll see. Beyond that, you look at the other players that are likely to still be here. I mean, is Stu Armstrong captain material? Is he going to play much? Other than that,
yeah, it's going to be a case of waiting and seeing, isn't it?
Pretty slim pickings. I mean, Alex McCarthy has been captain before, Jesus. I think, for a couple of games. But I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't have him starting the first game next season. So
I think it's a no from Glen.
Yeah,
Glenn, just a bit on Theo Walcott as well, announcing on social media before the game that he was off after 82 appearances, I think it is, over the 2 seasons. And you raised a very good question about who has made that call, because normally you would wait for the release list, wouldn't you, who we're not going to be renewing. At the end of the statement, it said, "My aim is to continue playing and I'm looking for the next challenge." So that's not someone that's decided they're going to hang up their boots. That's someone that's going to be looking at a move away or maybe another big pay deal.
Lots of ways of looking at this one, because I mean, let's face it, for the first year of his 2-year deal, he did nothing. And I think everyone would have been quite happy if he'd left at the start of this season. It should never have come to him getting back in the team. But the players who have played in those sort of positions, the wide midfield and attacking midfielders, have been so bad. and Theo has obviously worked hard, got himself back into contention, and in the main performed pretty well. It's a low bar when you compare to other people, but when you compare the levels of the other people, but he has certainly been, I would say, our best wide player certainly in the second half of the season. So I'm sure that money wouldn't have been the issue. I'm sure he would have signed on for less money. So maybe I'm thinking that now that he's got something lined up already, maybe he's got something in the States or somewhere else. Because if he stays in this country, you can't imagine he's going to get a game in the Premier League if he wants.
Well, it would be the Championship, isn't it?
So it'd be the Championship.
In which case, well, surely you stay where you are.
Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's got something lined up, and it's a decision that he's made himself. And in a way, I hope it is, because it's always nicer to make your own decision than to be than to have it made for you. So no, fair play to him. And I think we've had some bad attitude amongst the players this year, as far as I'm concerned, and he's been one that there's never been a question about his attitude and his desire to do well for the football club. So I think it's a shame that he's not going to be around from that point of view. But as I said last week, we've got to draw a line under this season and move forward with players who want to put a shift in, and so we're not looking at players like we have been this season and saying, and I'm wondering if they're really that bothered. So I'll miss him from that point of view. But I mean, if we stayed up by some miracle, I'd be thinking, yeah, it's time for him to move on. But yeah, I'm slightly disappointed that he's not going to be around next year. But I guess it's not the biggest surprise. Again,
we're saying maybe Bednarek for captain. Glen's going to be disappointed that Theo's not around next year. It's like, where have we come?
Give Mo El-Yunusi a new contract.
No. Couple of other bits on yesterday, Alfie. I just wanted to touch a phrase that I saw a couple of people mention yesterday in news was the changing of the guard, with James Ward-Prowse and Theo Walcott coming off, some of the younger academy products coming on. That has got to be a positive to take out of yesterday in these last few games.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as I was concerned, Cammy Doyle and Don Ballard were certainly much ahead of Sam Amoyamu, but I thought his cameo appearance yesterday was actually pretty sensational. There was one time where he picked the ball up on the halfway line and sort of turned somebody, went through two people and got something going. I think it ended up with a shot that was well saved actually from Walker Peters. It could have been a winner, but yeah, it had to be, didn't it? And I thought if Ward-Prowse was going to come off, and then it should have been for an academy player, and it was pretty cool that it was. It's just about now giving them these next steps. Hopefully they get more chances in the Championship. If they don't, then they need to find the right place for them to go and play football, because certainly someone like Dom, he's a small lad at the moment. He's obviously a goal scorer and he's been unbelievable, but he needs to be bigger. And I spoke to Cammy quite recently, and it's the same thing with him as well. So yeah, let's see where we go. But Southampton's always been about producing young players. It hasn't happened so much in the last 10 years, as you'll be all too familiar with, unfortunately. So we just have to make sure that happens.
And are they, when you speak to them, Alfie, are they confident that there is that pathway to the first team now? Are they happy to wait? Because we've had a few that have left and been maybe a little bit frustrated. But is there a good atmosphere and a good vibe among these young lads? Because I think they're going to be quite keen next year.
Well, I think they know that it's not going to be easy. And I think you've seen, like you mentioned, with Jimmy J. Morgan and Eddie Beach both going to Chelsea in slightly different circumstances this year. You've seen, when you've got 20-year-olds.
How many first team games have they played this year?
Well, none, of course. I mean, Jimmy's been injured ever since, but Eddie's enjoyed it very much. But I guess the point is that if you see Gavin Bazunu, 21, signed in front of you, if you see Samuel Edozie, Juan Larios, players in these respective positions, it probably does feel very difficult, doesn't it? To, if they spend £5 million on them, how am I ever going to get a game? So, but it's hard to tell when you speak to them. When I spoke to Cammy, he's a confident lad. I think he would expect to play a role, certainly in pre-season. I think he'll expect to somewhat play a role in the squad next season as well. But yeah, it's just about showing them, they've done well. They've done all they can so far. It's now about giving them a chance.
Someone else, Ben, who might take a bit of a confidence boost out of yesterday is Adam Armstrong. Pretty well taken goal. We mentioned that he was happy to stick around in the Championship. We saw him dropped out of the squad completely last week, back in. Well taken goal. Someone that wants to stay, has scored goals in the Championship. Could be a decent squad player next year.
I can see Glen instantly rest his chin in his hand there about this question. But do you know, I was thinking about this.
If now, never, really, well, isn't it? It's a case of, if you can't do it in the Championship, then...
That's the thing. I mean, we know that the squad needs a reset, but they haven't got the money and they haven't got the time to get rid of 25 players and bring in 25 new players. So they're obviously going to have to make some decisions over the next few weeks about who they want to stay and keep. Now, if we're assuming potentially, there's obviously been news of potential interest in Shea and people like that, and who actually, very unproven. So you potentially got someone there in Adam Armstrong that has scored goals at that level, has said he wants to stay. I mean, I've seen him play a few times this season, potentially, more on the road than at St Mary's, just because of where I'm based. And he looks like a player that obviously he looks confused half the time, like he doesn't know what his role is. He's obviously been played out of position, and I think the change of manager throughout the course of the season, 3 of them, I don't think it's helped players like him at all, because they're trying to learn different roles, different instructions. They're not getting the game time to really get out there and test it as well. So I think for me, he's not someone that I would kick out the door straight away. I think, you've got to look at him. He's got a record of scoring goals there. Obviously, it depends what Russell Martin or whoever it is wants to play up front. I imagine we're going to hopefully bring in at least 1 or 2 other strikers to compete for the positions as well. But at the moment, if you're 50-50 on him, for me, he's someone that I would think, well, he's done it in the Championship. Let's give him another chance, given that we're there now.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Jacob, one other thing I noticed yesterday was Ruben Sellers afterwards. He said, when we have more possession, we don't manage it the best way possible. Was that a bit of a nod to the future and the incoming manager and some of the stories this week?
Yeah, Russell Martin's got a lot on his plate, but it's basically just a byproduct of 4 or 5 years of just focusing mainly on out of possession and worrying about the automatisms and where to press the first, second, third phases of pressure, and not actually realising we can try and play through the thirds. I think the only time I saw in the last 5 years of Southampton trying to build layers in possession was during that COVID season when Vestergaard was playing really well. Ward-Prowse would take up a position at full-back and they'd try and build through that way, and that seemed to look quite good. And then obviously fans came back in and Southampton I think they got a little bit nervy. I don't know what it was. In the game state changed with fans back in the stadium, and they seemed to go back to type. And these players have all been built in Arsenal's image. Not one of them, arguably, apart from Lavia, although let's forget about Liverpool, can play through the thirds. You see the centre backs. I'd probably say, if we want to talk about captain, Lianco is probably the only one suited to play out from the back that could still be here next year. So I think that could potentially be something that Russell Martin factors in. So yeah, I think Ruben Sellers I asked him on Friday about what his principles of play are, and he says my principles of play are to win. And I think he's looking at that team, and it'd be interesting to see where he goes next and see how much that style of play differs to now, because he's obviously thought the quickest route to success here is to basically just mirror the style of Arsenal, and whether he has actually got his own philosophy when he moves outside the Southampton bubble.
A couple more changes as well as we start to look forward to the summer, as not as in we're excited to be looking forward to, as in physically looking forward to the next few weeks. So I don't think it's going to be enjoyable at all. But a few more departures, a few more people coming in, a couple of changes in the setup of the club. It's setting itself up, Steve, that this is going to be very much a Sport Republic summer, isn't it? There's going to be, at the end of this, no one else to blame with all the changes that they've made with those that have left and those that are coming in. It's going to be fully on them this summer.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue it's fully on them for the last 12 months anyway. But yeah, certainly
they might argue differently, of course.
Well, they might, but then we can all point to the sky and say the sky's green, and try and convince people. But unfortunately, the facts do not lie. And yeah, we're going into ultimately what is, I mean, Ankerson should know the Championship, and yet he came out with that absolute nonsense, didn't he? Saying that he doesn't think the Championship and the Premier League are too far different. So that's terrifying in itself. But the fact that we are now starting to appoint people into positions of potential power, so hopefully the sort of macro management from above won't be taking place, and Jason Wilcox and all the other people who are going to be involved in this process over the summer can just be left to get on with things, and their decisions are kind of, they're the ones that are allowed to take effect, and the board just kind of rubber stamp everything and transfer money to whoever needs paying. That's the hope. Whether it works in practice, Christ knows. I'm sure we'll be reading reports in September when we fail to get another 15-goal striker of how Rasmus Ankersen thought that he knew best and decided to kibosh the signing of whoever. Who ends up scoring 35 goals in the championship for Leicester, but we'll see.
Alfie, a couple more recruiters have been announced today. Is it Mark Bitcon, Director of Performance, Darren Mowbray, which we spoke about a week or so ago, confirmed as Head of Recruitment. It feels like it's all starting to take shape now, finally.
Yeah, it has to, doesn't it? They do like the City Group, don't they? I know Jacob's made reference to it before as well. I think although the head of performance didn't come directly from the City Group, come from English Rugby, I believe. They worked for the City Group for a few years, so they've obviously seen what they like there. It's Russell Martin's claimed that he likes Man City, Spain, and Barcelona. I think they've got a very clear image of what they want Southampton to look like in a few years' time. Whether we see that or not, I don't know. But yeah, you've got to get them in early. I think that's something that I credited them for as well. And I think Jake Buller said the same thing. Appointing the manager now, appointing the head of recruitment, appointing these guys, the academy director still to come. Get everybody on the same page with 62 days? Is it that few until the season starts? And then we can start working from there.
The other thing, Jacob, I think we picked up on today is that some of these new roles are going to be responsible for the Sport Republic clubs, and it wasn't just Southampton, isn't it? So it feels like there's that alignment that's starting to take shape that we've spoken about. Yeah,
and I think we'll see a bit more of that once they actually start to be an actual multi-club in terms of purchasing more than two clubs. And it's confusing as well if you look at the board, two different boards. Dragon Solex on the Sport Republic board, not the Southampton board. Hands-on in the day-to-day running of Southampton, more so Sport Republic. So you've got all these people in all these positions, and it's now about connecting all of them together. And that, I think, it's probably made easier for Sport Republic that they've all got everyone singing from the same hymn sheet. If you were going to try and do that with the existing staff, obviously there's been issues. Hence why after 6 to 12 months, Sport Republic have said, right, we need to get rid of all these people, or they need to resign because they're clearly not suited to our multi-club model or our punchy ideas, to say the least. So I think from now on in, as Steve and Glen alluded to, this is their ship that they have to steer, and it's all going to be on them, and they have to make sure that alignment that Rasmus Ankersen speaks about endlessly, and which he did to real good success in other businesses and at Brentford, translates here. And it's really important that they do it immediately, because if that alignment's not here between Southampton and Giuseppe, the French club that they're going to be buying soon, then it could potentially have a load of clubs in meltdown with a lot of fan bases very, very angry.
And Glenn, heading into the summer, what is going to be a good signal of intent from the board? Obviously, the manager coming in, it seems like they're making a few recruitments. What's next for you? Is it coming out and new deals for players, or do you want to see some people coming in, or people just committing themselves for next year? What needs to happen next?
As far as Sport Republic are concerned, I don't want to hear from them. I want the people that know about football.
Disappointed, Glenn.
Yeah, I want the people who know about football to be the ones that we hear from. If Jason Wilcox wants to, to say something about the squad and the players and whatnot, then I'd like to hear that. I mean, we all know that there's going to be some pain with, various fans' favourite players are probably going to be leaving. The 6 or 7 that we've got that are going to be wanted by Premier League clubs. So there's going to be times, I'm sure, this summer where we're looking at it thinking we haven't got a functioning team on the pitch with the squad that we've got, because all the forwards have left or whatever. But we haven't had a functioning.
We've been there before, haven't we?
We haven't had a functioning team all season. At the end of the transfer window back in September, you looked at it and we'd signed 9 young players and 2 older players who have turned out not to play at all, Aribo and Chilette Azar. So it's not new to be in a mess, and I think we're gonna have to put up with it. Also, you've got a month of the season before the transfer window closes, so there's a very good chance that the season starts, and I don't know, someone like Tino Livramento we might get if he plays the first 4 games next season, we might lose him at the end of. At the very end of the transfer window. So I think that there's going to be a lot of flux. But yeah, I just want to see things happen. I want to see some of the high earners that we know are going to go. I want to see them go on tomorrow, to be honest. And early signs are good that they realise the urgency, and things are going to happen fairly quickly. But when it comes to players and contracts and all that sort of stuff, it always seems to drag a little bit. So I think the first thing is to get rid of the players that we know are not going to be here, and the ones that don't want to be here, because there's we've got one player, and we all know who he is, who gave an interview saying he wasn't bothered if he was in the team or not. Now, if you're not bothered about being in a team that's bottom of the league, and you're not questioning why and what you can do better, I don't want players like that around, regardless if we're playing at a lower level next year. I want to see the bad apples rooted out, and us start to move forward from now, because there's no point in repeating the same mistakes. I mean, that's a real definition of madness stuff, isn't it? You really need to get things moving, and if we start signing all young players again, we know where that leads. So there's got to be some sort of deviation from that. For my money, we need battle-hardened championship players who know what this league is like. I'd rather sign a Dean Hammond type of player to play in the centre of midfield than to sign another 18-year-old, from Manchester City's youth team or whatever. So
I'm sure there'll be a few of those.
It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But yeah, I want it to start now.
I'm going to ask you all in a minute for your highlight of the season, whatever that might be. That might be an away trip, it might be a performance, it might be a goal. If you're watching live, by the way, then just you can let us know what yours is in the comments. I'm looking for the highlight of the season, and I'm also looking for a positive to take into next season as well. So I just a heads up, because I think you're going to need to think about that one. Then with the relegation to the Championship, it opens up the opportunity for someone to become a hero again. I'm thinking of Ricky Lambert and that kind of player, and Glen was talking about those that have to come in with a bit of an experienced head that know the league. It's an opportunity for somebody if they get the recruitment right. What needs to be done first for you heading into the summer?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things here, and I'm just going to build on the point that Jacob made last week, which is about the strategy, right? They need to have a clear strategy on what they're doing, top to bottom of the club. It's fine bringing in all these people, and it's great, as you say, Glenn, that they've moved quickly to bring people in. But these people need to know what they're coming in to do. They need to know what the structure is, what the team that's working for them, what their objectives are. Like any business models. And let's be honest as well, as you guys have said on the pod week after week for about the last 6-7 weeks, Saints have been going down for a long time now. They've had plenty of time to prepare for this. So it does feel like the wheels are in motion, and they need to kick that in to action. And I think the other thing as well is they need to start building some confidence with the employees that are left in the building and those that are coming in, that they can actually make the right decisions. I think arguably, other than Charlie Alcaraz, they haven't made one right decision yet, Sport Republic, since they came into Saints. And even he's a diamond in the rough that's got work to do, but at least he's shown some potential, and there's things there to work on. So for me, it's just about starting to build confidence, because as a fan, Martin, and we're all fans here, most of us, is you see good people walk out the door, the likes of Toby, Matt Crocker, people like that have been at the club, Matt Hale, someone that's been there and done a fantastic job. These people must be leaving for a reason. So I think it's so important now that those sort of experienced heads that they've had to lean on, Sport Republic, are no longer there, and it's now about really starting to build confidence in who is in the building, that they can make the right decisions and help Saints move forward. And for me, that's the two most important things.
So it's a culture from the top as well, isn't it? All the way down to the players on the pitch. Steve, what about you? Just quickly on the summer. I mean, I guess what we need to recruit is going to largely depend on who stays and who goes. So is that what happens first? You want to see a few players come out and go, yeah, I'm here. You don't need to bother about my position.
Yes, I think so. The problem is you're likely to hear that from the players you least want to hear it from. But
already.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those, isn't it? You're all in this sort of situation. You are going to want to keep the players that will inevitably attract the most attention from elsewhere. So hopefully there's a balance in that. We know that there's probably 3 or 4 that are almost certainly out the door and will get good money for them. The hope then is that the 3 or 4 kind of just below that tier of sort of top players that we've kind of had this season. Okay, can we keep 2, 3 of those? kind of persuade them to give it one more season in the Championship. If it doesn't work out, then this time next year, then we say goodbye and they leave with our blessing. Will that happen? Don't know. Ultimately, there's going to be some conversations in the club where they're presumably just going to try and offload people, even if it means paying off contracts or shipping them off on loan to overseas clubs. But of course, there's now a loan limit. We can only send, I think, 8 players on loan in total, which might even be coming down next season. It might, because I think it's a stage reduction down to a maximum of 6 at some point that FIFA have brought
That's interesting.
in. So that doesn't make our kind of bloated squad situation any easier to manage. So yeah, I think ultimately, actually, you don't necessarily need to hear kind of out and out commitment from people, although there's kind of been hints at it from various players on social media and such like. I think actually you want decisive action from the club in terms of hawking these players around and getting the moves for the players that we don't want as quickly as possible, because you root out these players, all of a sudden there's a little bit of space on the payroll. There's a seat in the dressing room for a start. I know obviously pre-season won't begin until the start of July, but yeah, once you've got the squad down to a manageable size again, then you can start looking at it from the other way in terms of getting people in before then releasing players who are deemed surplus to requirements. Whereas now I think we've got to shed the extra fat first, which I mean, it's not going to be easy. And yeah, good luck to Jason Wilcox on that.
That's the overriding message. Right, highlight of the season. Gary's watching on YouTube, says the highlight of the season was the final whistle yesterday. Mark's one of our patrons says the highlight for me was the Chelsea home win. Despite having a season ticket, it was the only win I saw all season. And Paul says the highlight of the season for me was Paul Doswell's rant on Radio Solent, because we then won the next 3 games. I'm going to go reverse order. Jacob, first your highlight of the season, please, if you will.
Obviously, covering my club is always a highlight. But if I had to pick any part of the season, I'd probably say meeting Joe Tesson, because we're now gym buddies. We go to gym 4 times a week. He gives me unbelievable dietary advice.
Gym friends.
Yeah. and we just rant about Southampton for about an hour and a half nearly every day.
Brilliant.
So probably meeting Joe Tesson, I'd say that. But nothing to do with football, really.
But you've enjoyed your first season covering Southampton, right? Ups and downs.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to write a few more positive pieces. I've tried with the academy, which has been quite nice. And obviously, if we're going to keep breaking stories, I'd like it to be more about how well a player is doing, or a really good signing, not having to do a sacking read of why every member of staff's disillusioned at the club. So yeah, it's obviously not been the most ideal situation, bearing in mind I've been supporter for 22 years, and the one season I finally get this job, it ends in disaster. But it's been good, and the only way I hope the only way is up.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Glenn, highlight the season for you, please.
Nathan Jones press conference at Brentford.
It was a classic.
It's absolutely the best bit, because I knew he was going at that point. That was the point where I knew he was gone. If you're talking performances, then it's got to be beating Manchester City in the cup. But there's a double edge to that as well, because it kept Nathan Jones in a job for 3 or 4 extra weeks, which he if he'd got sacked 4 weeks earlier, maybe
at what cost? Yeah,
maybe we'd have had a better choice of manager to bring in. But if it had just given us another 4 weeks of Ruben Sellers, it wouldn't have been any point anyway. So yeah, I mean that's the Brentford press conference was the thing I found was the most amusing moment. But yeah, I'll go with that.
Steve, your highlight of the season, if you will.
From a footballing perspective, beating what was at the time still theoretically a good Chelsea team back at the end of August. They still had a proper manager in charge, and they were looking like they were going to be top 4 comfortably again. And we played really well that night. And I think everyone kind of thought, after what looked like a really tough run of fixtures on paper in that opening month, Obviously, we took a bit of a spanking at Spurs on the opening day, but other than that, we played quite well in those opening 6 or 7 games. And I don't think anybody would have quite foreseen the kind of slump that we then that kind of then followed. So yeah, that was kind of about as good as it got, I think. I assume that put us like 8th at the time, in the sort of very, very sort of early days of the season. But yeah, that was a good performance, a great night, and unfortunately the Lavia injury was probably what did for Ralph in the end, I suspect.
Alfie, what's your highlight of the season? Have you been out for 5K runs with Alan Blackmore? Have you been spotting him at the gym? What's been your highlight?
Adam, I'm not sure either of us could do that. I certainly couldn't. Glen's had the same ones as me. I've got Nathan Jones's press conferences for a start, although obviously slightly gallows in that because they were disastrous, but they were enjoyable. They were funny. He was an interesting man. And the Man City win was probably the one a performance that made me feel like football never has before, really. I just think the way they beat Man City and the underdog story, it was just a shame that it was then tainted with a rant about Tanswell afterwards, which again was also quite entertaining. But I'd also say that perhaps going up to Newcastle on Monday, January the 30th, and then doing deadline day on Tuesday and the Cup semi-final, and then driving back on the Wednesday from a fresher point of view, that was quite an experience. And it was a long day, but it was something that I really enjoyed.
Buzzing. Ben, I guess your trip to see the Fulham game isn't going to be your highlight.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was my brother's stag do that we booked into the Aspire Lounge. So thankfully we got to meet Latiz and BT, which made it, but hopefully the marriage will be a lot more successful than that game was anyway. But I think for me, probably going to Goodison back in, January, I think. Nathan Jones' only win, wasn't it, against good old Frank Lampard's Everton. I think, for me, it capped a wonderful personal treble over the years of seeing Benali score in the Premier League, seeing Martin Caceres play in a Saints shirt up at Borough, and then obviously winning at Goodison Park after 27 years. And we spoke about him earlier, 2 great for different reasons goals from Prowse that day. So it was nice to for the rest of my life now I can say that I've seen Saints win at Goodison Park, and there aren't many Saints fans that can say that, Martin.
No, well, that's true. Yeah. Yesterday I was thinking we're going to have to go there twice next year as well. So, I mean, that kept within 45 minutes of happening. Ben, I'm going to stay with you because as game week 38 came to a close, all eyes were on the Fantasy Premier League app yesterday. I know you've got the final update for us on the TSP Patron Championship. Yeah,
exactly. So I think let's start with the FPL Cup because we had the league and obviously the cup as well for our patrons only. And the cup was a bit of a USA feel to the final. Unfortunately, Alfie got knocked out in the semi-finals, but I won't draw attention to that, Alfie. But the runner-up in the cup was Shane De Zilwa over in California. So he got 27 points in game week 38. And the winner who beat him was congratulations to Corey Brenneman, who's also in Cincinnati, Ohio. So his team, James Ward-Prowse, got 36 points to take the trophy. So well done to you, Corey. I've been in touch already through Patreon, and there'll be a 2022-23 t-shirt on its way to you over in Ohio. And then in terms of the FPL League, Martin, you're right. Obviously just for patrons this season, but top 3 in reverse order. Tom McCann came third with Manchester City 2-5-1-5. He actually won it the last 2 years in a row, so he knows what he's doing, does Tom. But came third this time round. Second was Ilya Markov, who's a part of the Bulgaria Saints over in Sofia. Kakala Appreciation 2-5-8-2. So both fantastic scores there. But the winner in the end was Charlie Hawkins with the Happy World of Aribo, which has got a slight ironic tone to it. A massive 2,640, so 2,640 points, which is a fantastic effort. So congratulations, Charlie. And likewise, a Money Can't Buy t-shirt coming to you. But yeah, just quickly, Martin, to say thanks to all of our patrons, not only for playing in the FPL this season if they have, but I think to the whole group, all of them, for all of their support and keeping the podcast going this year. As you guys know, and you regularly say, Martin, it wouldn't run without them. So a big and massive thank you to all of them.
And if you've been watching every week and listening, you'll know that we always do the predictions league just for a bit of fun. Ben, are you going to buy yourself a t-shirt out of the budget because the results have been checked and verified and you actually won the predictions league? So congratulations. What was your secret?
Well, I think following the Mark Lawrenson principle of just predicting Saints to lose every week. So I think I ended up on 29 points. So there must have been a few games that I didn't predict them to lose in. But I said to Alex earlier, just the satisfaction really of winning that, Martin, is enough for me. So So yeah, I think we'll see who picks it up next year in the Championship. Obviously, there's more games to predict, so I could end up with a lot more points.
Yeah, as Alfie said, it was a tough season for the Optimist. Glen, you were second, so well done. Alfie was third. Alex, who produces the podcast, was fourth, which is a little bit embarrassing for you and I, Steve and Jacob, actually, because he doesn't even like football, and he came fourth. Me and Jacob were joint fifth, and then Steve was the Southampton of the Predictions League. So
yep, miles adrift.
Yeah, the less said about that, the better, I think. But it's been good fun, and thanks to everyone that's given us their predictions as they've gone on. That's pretty much it for this week and this season, actually. So thank you to all the patrons for their support this year. Your TSP patron t-shirts are going to be sent out this week, so keep an eye on the post for those. As you know, we always finish with the weekly shout outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Matt Hall, Andy Hollis, and Andy Thompson in the Francis Benali tier, and also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in our Mick Shannon tier. To find out more about becoming a TSP patron next season and the benefits that come with that, do check out the website over the summer. My thanks to Steve, to Glenn, and to Ben. Thanks also to Alfie and Jacob. It's been great having your insight each week. It's been really great having you on. Thank you to Alex Graham as well for producing the podcast each week. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll be back next season covering Southampton in the Championship, which seems funny to say. Have a great summer, and